She accidentally signed to the vampire king's mute son at a royal dinner party. The whole room became quiet. What she didn't know was that she was the first person besides his teacher who had ever spoken his language, and the lonely king watching from his throne would do anything to keep her there. The fancy glasses sparkled in the candlelight like frozen stars. Lena's hand shook as she carried the silver tray, walking between lords wearing fancy cloaks and ladies covered in jewels. She had worked at the palace for 3 months, and she still wasn't used to the vampire eyes watching her every move. "More wine for Lord Cassius," the head servant whispered loudly, pushing her toward the high table. Lena's heart beat fast. The high table was where the king sat. She had only seen King Aldrich from far away, a man who looked like he was made of marble and shadows, with eyes that could freeze your blood. Tonight he wore black armor even at dinner, as if he expected a fight to start at any moment. But it wasn't the king that made her stop. It was the small boy sitting next to him. Prince Alaric looked about 7 years old. While the rich people laughed and clinked glasses around him, the child sat perfectly still, staring at his plate of food that he hadn't touched. His dark hair fell across his pale cheeks, and his small hands rested in his lap like hurt birds. No one talked to him. No one even looked at him. Lena walked up to the table, her footsteps silent on the marble floor. She reached for the king's empty glass, moving carefully and slowly. "Don't look them in the eye. Don't speak unless they speak to you. Don't—" A servant rushing past bumped her elbow. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. The tray tipped. 3 crystal glasses slid toward the edge, spinning through the air in a wave of silver and glass. They crashed onto the table right in front of Prince Alaric. Red wine splashed across the white tablecloth like fresh blood. The entire room went silent. 500 conversations stopped in the middle. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even the musicians in the corner stopped playing, the last note hanging in the air like a held breath. Lena's knees hit the floor. "Forgive me, Your Majesty, But her eyes found the prince first. Wine had splashed across his sleeve. A piece of broken crystal sat inches from his hand. But the boy didn't jump or cry out. He simply stared at the mess with wide, dark eyes, his small body stiff with fear he couldn't speak out loud. Without thinking, Lena's hands moved. "Are you okay?" She signed it quickly, naturally, the same way she'd signed to her little brother back in the village before the sickness took him. Her fingers made the familiar shapes, the gesture for you, the worried look, the questioning tilt. Prince Alaric's head snapped up. His eyes met hers, really met them for the first time. They were the color of midnight, huge in his small face, and suddenly filled with something that looked like lightning trapped in a bottle. The prince's hands flew up from his lap. "I'm fine," he signed back, his movements sharp with excitement. "You can sign. You know how." His little hands trembled as they formed the words, moving so fast they blurred together. A smile broke across his face, the kind of smile that hadn't seen sunlight in too long. "No one signs except teacher. Are you new? What's your name? Do you know the sign for dragon? I learned it yesterday." Silence. The king's voice cut through the hall like a knife through silk. Every head turned, every back straightened. Lena felt the word wrap around her throat like a rope. King Aldrich rose from his throne, standing to his full height. He was tall, incredibly tall, with shoulders that blocked out the candlelight behind him. His crown sat heavy on his head, dark metal decorated with blood-red rubies. He wasn't looking at Lena. He was looking at his son. Prince Alaric's hands froze mid-sign. The smile slid from his face, replaced by that terrible stillness Lena had seen before. The boy's eyes dropped to his lap and his shoulders curled inward, making him even smaller than he already was. The king's look shifted to Lena. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. His eyes were the color of winter storms and just as cold. "You," he said quietly. "Stand." Lena's legs barely held her up as she stood. Around the hall, rich people whispered behind jeweled hands. She caught pieces of their words. Signed to the prince. Never seen him respond to anyone. Just a human servant. How dare she? King Aldrich walked down from the platform, each step careful and slow. The crowd moved away before him like water before a ship. He stopped 3 steps from Lena, close enough that she could see the silver in his dark hair, the faint scars on his knuckles that told of old battles. Where did you learn that? His voice was quiet, but it traveled through the silent hall like thunder. In my village, Your Majesty. Lena's voice cracked. My brother was born deaf. I learned to speak with my hands so he wouldn't be alone. The king's face didn't change. Your brother? Where is he now? Dead, sire, 5 years ago. Something flickered across the king's face, too quick to understand. He glanced back at Prince Alaric, who was watching them with desperate, begging eyes. The rich people waited for the king's decision. A few looked eager, hoping for entertainment. Others seemed uncomfortable, perhaps remembering their own humanity buried deep beneath hundreds of years of being immortal. King Aldrich turned to his assistant, a thin vampire with silver glasses who stood near the throne. Find this woman's name and job. Report to my office within the hour. He returned to his seat without another word. The musicians began playing again, carefully at first, then with more confidence. Conversation started again. Servants rushed forward to clean the spilled wine and broken crystal. But Prince Alaric's eyes never left Lena as she was led away. His small hands moved one final time, hidden beneath the table, where only she could see. Thank you. Lena spent the next hour in the servants' sleeping area, waiting for the executioner's call. The other servants gave her sorry looks and stayed far away, as if bad luck might be catching. You're the girl who spilled wine on the prince? An older woman asked, shaking her head. Best make peace with whatever god you pray to, child. But when the assistant finally arrived, he didn't bring guards. He brought instructions. You are to report to the East Wing kitchen at sunrise, he said, fixing his glasses. You'll be given the morning shift. Your duties will include preparing and delivering breakfast to the prince's courtyard. Lena stared at him. I'm not being sent away? No, girl. You're being promoted. He left before she could ask what that meant. That night, Lena lay awake in her narrow bed, replaying the moment over and over. The way the prince's entire face had changed when she'd signed to him. The way his hands had moved so fast, so eager, so desperately happy. And the way the king had looked at his son afterward, when he thought no one was watching, not with anger, but with something that looked almost like sadness. The king's private office smelled of old leather and older secrets. Shadows gathered in the corners despite the fire burning in the fireplace, as if even light knew better than to push too far into Aldrich's space. He stood by the window, watching the moon paint silver streaks across the palace gardens. Behind him, his assistant waited with the patience of someone who'd served for 300 years. The human serving girl, Aldrich said without turning. What do you know of her? The assistant looked at his leather book. Lena Thorne, Your Majesty. 22 years old. Arrived from the eastern villages 3 months ago, looking for work. Her references show she is reliable and the sign language. Aldrich's fingers pressed against the cold glass. How does a village girl learn such things? She had a younger brother, sire. Born without speech or hearing. She learned to communicate with him before he died from illness. The assistant paused. The village priest taught them both. Apparently, it's a language used in certain human churches for silent prayer. Aldrich closed his eyes. He had hired 7 teachers for Alaric over the past 2 years. Private teachers who came at sunrise and left at sunset, teaching his son to communicate in the language of hands and expressions. But they were paid workers doing a job. Tonight, he had watched his son smile for the first time in months. Over spilled wine and broken crystal, a human girl had given Alaric something no amount of gold could buy. Someone who spoke to him simply because they could. The boy was excited, Aldrich said quietly. I've never seen him move his hands so quickly. Prince Alaric seemed quite taken with her, yes, taken. Such a simple word for the desperate hope that had shined in his son's eyes. Aldrich had seen that look only once before, the day Alaric's mother died, when the boy had screamed silent screams that no one could hear, his small hands forming words his father couldn't understand. That was the day Aldrich had stopped trying to reach him. Not because he didn't love the boy, but because every try felt like watching his son drown while standing on the shore, unable to swim. Give her the day shift, Aldrich said, near the prince's wing. The assistant's pen scratched against paper. Very good, sire. Shall I tell her the reason for the change? No. Aldrich turned from the window. His reflection in the glass looked older than it had that morning. Let her think it's simply a new job. Nothing more. As you wish. The assistant bowed and moved toward the door, then stopped. Sire, if I may speak freely? Aldrich nodded once. Prince Alaric has been alone for a very long time. Perhaps this is not such a terrible accident after all. After the assistant left, Aldrich sat at his desk and pulled out a drawer he rarely opened. Inside lay a small painted picture of his late wife, Elena, laughing with baby Alaric in her arms. She'd been human once before, choosing to become immortal to stay by his side. She would have known what to do, what to say. The king's hands turned into fists. She was good at talking, at connecting. I'm good at war, at planning battles, at breaking things. But Elena was gone, and Aldrich had an entire kingdom to rule. Wars to plan, treaties to negotiate, 100 problems that demanded his attention every day. Except none of them mattered as much as the small boy who sat alone at dinner parties, invisible in plain sight. Aldrich's hand moved carefully, trying to remember the signs he'd seen at dinner. His fingers felt clumsy and awkward. How did the girl make it look so easy? He pulled his hand back, frustrated. Tomorrow. He would deal with this tomorrow. Meanwhile, in the servants' sleeping area, Lena stared at her new assignment paper in disbelief. The prince's wing? Her roommate, Mari, looked shocked at the notice. Lena, that's where they send the most trusted servants. People who've worked here for years. I must have read it wrong. Lena held the paper up to the candlelight, but the words didn't change. Report to the East Wing kitchen at sunrise. Deliver breakfast to Prince Alaric's private courtyard. Daily assignment until further notice. You spoke to the prince in that hand language of yours, didn't you? Mary's eyes were wide. Everyone's talking about it. They say he actually smiled. He's just a child, Lena said softly. A lonely one. He's the heir to the vampire throne. Mari grabbed Lena's shoulders. Do you understand what this means? The king doesn't do anything by accident. He's putting you near his son on purpose. A chill ran down Lena's spine. Why would he do that? Maybe he wants to see if it was luck. Or maybe, Mari's voice dropped to a whisper. Maybe he's testing you, seeing if you're dangerous. I'm not dangerous to anyone. But Lena's hands trembled as she folded the assignment paper. The prince looked so scared when the glass broke. I wanted to make sure he was all right. Well, tomorrow you'll get your chance to make sure again. Mari squeezed her arm. Just be careful, Lena. The royal family isn't like us. They don't think like us. And that little boy, he's not just a child. He belongs to the crown. That night, Lena dreamed of small hands forming desperate words in the dark, and a king made of winter watching from a distance, unable or unwilling to reach. Sunrise broke cold and golden over the palace. Lena's hands shook as she balanced the breakfast tray, not from its weight, but from knowing where she was taking it. The prince's courtyard lay at the end of a marble hallway lined with paintings of serious-faced vampire ancestors. Their painted eyes seemed to follow her, judging a human servant walking where few were allowed. She pushed open the iron gate with her hip. The courtyard took her breath away. Night-blooming flowers covered every surface, moon vines and shadow roses that should have closed with the sunrise but somehow stayed open here, their petals glowing in the early light. A small fountain bubbled in the center, its water crystal clear. Stone benches curved beneath a willow tree that dropped silver leaves. And there, sitting cross-legged on the grass, was Prince Alaric. He hadn't noticed her yet. His attention was fixed on something in his hands, a small bird's nest held carefully in his palms. He was looking at it with the serious focus only children could have, his dark hair falling into his eyes. Lena set the tray on a nearby table. The soft sound of dishes made Alaric's head snap up. His eyes widened. Then his whole face changed, that same brilliant smile from last night breaking across his features like sunrise. You came, he signed, scrambling to his feet. The bird's nest wobbled dangerously. I thought maybe I dreamed you. Nobody told me you'd be here. Are you my new breakfast person? What's your name? His hands moved so fast Lena almost couldn't keep up. She laughed, setting down the teapot before signing back. Slow down, little prince. Yes, I'm real. My name is Lena. Lena? He spelled it carefully with his fingers, learning. That's a nice name. Can you stay while I eat, please? Teacher doesn't come until after lunch and there's nobody to talk to. He stopped suddenly, his smile fading. His hands lowered, and that closed-off look returned to his face. The same one from the dinner party when his father had spoken. "I'm sorry," he signed small and quick. "You probably have other work." "I shouldn't keep you." Lena's heart cracked. She knelt on the grass beside him, ignoring the wetness soaking into her dress. "I have nowhere more important to be than right here." Alaric stared at her. Then slowly the smile came back. "Really? Really?" For the next hour, Lena learned more about Prince Alaric than she'd imagined possible. He showed her his collection of interesting stones arranged by color along the garden wall. He explained through big signs and excited expressions how he was studying the birds that visited the fountain each morning. A family of sparrows had built a nest in the willow tree, and he'd found this fallen one beneath it. "Do you think they're sad?" he signed, holding up the empty nest. "That they lost their home?" "Maybe," Lena signed back. "But birds are smart. They'll build a new one." "I would build them one, but my hands are too big." He looked at his palms sadly. "Well, too big for bird nests. Too small for everything else." "What do you mean?" Alaric hesitated. His hands moved slowly now, carefully. "Father has big hands. Warrior hands. He can hold swords and sign treaties and lift heavy things. My hands can only do this." He wiggled his fingers. "Talking that nobody else understands." "I understand," Lena signed. "You're the only one except teacher." Alaric sat beside her on the grass. "Do you know what's funny? In the whole palace with hundreds of people, only 2 can hear me, and one of them is paid to." The casual way he said it, as if he'd accepted being alone as a simple fact, made Lena want to gather him up like the fallen nest and promise to keep him safe. "Well, now you have me," she signed. "And I'm not going anywhere." Alaric's eyes grew wet. He nodded quickly, then stood and tugged her hand. "Come on. I want to show you my favorite spot." He led her to the far corner of the courtyard, where the morning light hit just right, making the grass covered in dew sparkle like diamonds. He sat down and patted the ground beside him. "This is where I come when I'm sad," he signed. "It's pretty. Pretty things help." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher. A sparrow landed on the fountain's edge, tilted its head at them, then flew away. "Lena," Alaric signed after a while. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you help me last night?" "You could have gotten in trouble." "You still might." Lena thought about her answer carefully. "Because you looked scared, and nobody should be scared and alone at the same time." Alaric took this in. Then he signed with the blunt honesty of children. "I'm scared and alone a lot." Before Lena could respond, footsteps echoed from the hallway. Both of them turned. A figure stood in the archway, outlined against the morning sun. King Aldrich. He wasn't wearing his armor today, just dark clothes that made him look less like a warrior and more like a man. His eyes moved from Lena to his son, then to their hands frozen mid-conversation. How long had he been watching? Alaric scrambled to his feet, his earlier joy disappearing. He bowed his head, small and formal and perfectly obedient. The king took one step forward, then stopped. His jaw moved as if he wanted to say something but didn't know how. Finally, he turned and walked away without a word. Alaric sat back down slowly. He didn't sign anything else that morning, just held the bird's nest in his lap and stared at where his father had been standing. Rain hammered against the palace windows like 1,000 impatient fingers. Lena had been delivering breakfast to Alaric's courtyard for 6 days now, and each morning the prince was already waiting for her, usually with something new to show her. A butterfly wing, a perfectly round pebble. Once a drawing he'd made of the 2 of them sitting by the fountain. But today, the courtyard was empty. Lena set down the tray, worry eating at her stomach. Had something happened? Had the king changed his mind about her job? A small hand tugged at her sleeve. She spun around to find Alaric standing behind her, practically shaking with excitement. His hair was damp from the rain, his clothes spotted with water. "Come with me," he signed urgently. "I want to show you something secret." "Prince Alaric, you're soaked. You should, please." His eyes were huge and begging. "It's important. And it's inside. How could anyone say no to that face?" Alaric grabbed her hand and pulled her through a side door she'd never noticed before, down a narrow servant's passage, then up a spiral staircase that seemed to climb forever. Finally, they came out into a long hallway lined with tall windows. At the end stood a huge oak door carved with detailed symbols. The Royal Library. "We can't," Lena signed quickly. "Servants aren't allowed." But Alaric was already pushing the door open. The library was magnificent. Shelves stretched up 3 stories, connected by spiral staircases and narrow bridges. Rainbow-colored light filtered through stained glass windows, painting the floors in soft colors. The smell of old paper and leather hung thick in the air. "Isn't it wonderful?" Alaric signed, his face glowing. "Nobody comes here anymore. Father's too busy. The rich people think reading is boring. It's just me and the books." He pulled her toward a low shelf in the corner where big picture books sat gathering dust. He picked one with a faded cover showing a castle and a dragon. "These are vampire fairy tales," he signed. "Teacher reads them to me, but I like them better when I tell them myself." He opened the book and Lena saw that someone, probably a teacher from years past, had added small sign language drawings in the margins, showing how to sign each important word. Alaric's hands began to move, telling the story. His signing was beautiful, full of feeling and smooth, painting pictures in the air. He signed about a brave knight and a lonely dragon who couldn't breathe fire, about how everyone feared the dragon because of what he was supposed to be, not who he actually was. Lena found herself pulled into the tale. When Alaric signed the part where the dragon finally roared, not with fire, but with wind that carried flower petals, she acted it out, sweeping her arms wide and making him laugh silently, his small shoulders shaking with joy. "Your turn," he signed, pushing another book into her hands. This one was about a princess who lived in a tower. Lena signed the story, making her expressions big, making Alaric's eyes grow wide at the scary parts and light up during the happy ones. When she signed about the princess dancing alone in her tower, she stood and twirled, nearly knocking over a stack of books. Alaric clapped his hands, not making sound, but the gesture of clapping anyway. He jumped up to join her, and they spun together between the bookshelves, the forbidden library changing into a stage for stories. Only they could tell. They didn't. Hear the door open. Alaric, the king's voice cut through their joy like a knife through silk. Lena's heart stopped. She dropped into a curtsy so fast her knees hit the floor, pain shooting up her legs. Beside her, Alaric froze mid-spin, his arms falling to his sides. King Aldrich stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his dark cloak. His face was unreadable, carved from stone, showing nothing. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," Lena gasped. "I didn't mean to. The prince wanted to show me. I should have refused." "Stand." She obeyed, legs trembling. This was it. She'd be fired, possibly worse. But the king wasn't looking at her. He was watching his son. Alaric stood perfectly still, head bowed, waiting for punishment. All the light had gone out of him, replaced by that terrible, resigned stillness. The king stepped into the library. His boots echoed on the marble floor. He walked past Lena, past the scattered books, until he stood right in front of Alaric. Then he did something unexpected. He knelt, bringing himself down to his son's level, his cloak spreading around him like spilled ink. Alaric's head came up slowly, confusion written across his small face. The king's hand moved, clumsy, uncertain, forming a single sign. One Lena had taught him during their morning conversations, though Alaric couldn't know that. Happy. It was rough, the fingers not quite right, but the meaning was clear. "You look happy," the king tried to sign, though his hands stumbled over the words. Alaric's eyes went wide. His mouth opened in a silent gasp. The king looked at Lena then, and she saw something in his face she hadn't expected. Not anger, not suspicion, but desperation. "Stay," he said quietly. "Continue." He moved to a chair near the window, far enough to give them space, close enough to watch. He didn't pick up a book or pretend to work. He simply sat and watched as Alaric, after a long moment of shock, slowly picked up the storybook again. "Should we?" Alaric signed hesitantly to Lena. She glanced at the king. He nodded once, so they continued. Alaric signed his stories and Lena acted them out. And sometimes, very sometimes, Alaric would look over at his father as if checking to make sure this wasn't a dream. The king watched his son speak with his hands, and though he couldn't understand most of it, he didn't look away. Not once. The whispers started small, like poison seeping through cracks. Did you hear? The human girl spends hours alone with the prince, in the library of all places. Completely wrong. The king allows it. Can you imagine? Lena heard the rumors in the servants' hall, in the hallways, even in the kitchen where she collected Alaric's breakfast each morning. The other servants no longer looked her in the eyes. Some looked at her with jealousy, others with pity. Mari pulled her aside one evening, her face pale. They're saying you've put a spell on the prince, that you're using him to get close to power. That's ridiculous. He's 7 years old. Lena, listen to me. Mari gripped her shoulders. Lord Cassius spoke to the council yesterday. He said it's unseemly for a human servant to have so much influence over the heir. He called you a security risk. A security risk for teaching a lonely child to smile? But the rich people's opinions didn't truly frighten Lena. What frightened her was the look on Alaric's face when she was 10 minutes late to breakfast one morning. The panic in his eyes. The way his hands had trembled when he signed. I thought they made you leave. She was becoming important to him. Too important. And that made her vulnerable. The summons came on a gray afternoon. Lord Chancellor, Valeria's requests your presence in the East Solar, a guard told her, his face carefully neutral. Lena's stomach dropped. The Lord Chancellor was the king's chief advisor, second only to Aldrich himself in power. His word could end her job or her life. The East Solar was a cold room despite the fire burning in its fireplace. Lord Valerius stood by the window, his back to her. He was an ancient vampire, thin as a blade with silver hair pulled back tightly. Miss Thorne. He didn't turn around. Do you know why I've called you here? No, my lord. I think you do. Now he turned and his eyes were like chips of ice. You've been seen spending a lot of time with Prince Alaric, time that goes beyond your duties as a breakfast server. The prince enjoys having someone to talk to, my lord. The prince, Valerius interrupted, is the heir to the vampire throne. His companions should be carefully chosen from rich families, not picked from the servant class on a whim. Lena's hands clenched into fists at her sides. With respect, my lord, those rich families don't speak his language. A temporary problem. The boy will outgrow this condition. He'll learn to communicate properly like any other royal. He already communicates properly. Just not in the way you understand. The words escaped before Lena could stop them. Valerius's eyes narrowed dangerously. You forget yourself, girl. His voice dropped to a whisper. Let me be clear. There are members of this court who believe Prince Alaric is unsuitable as heir. They see his silence as weakness, a liability. Lena's blood ran cold. They want to replace him. They want a strong heir. One who can address the council, negotiate with foreign leaders, command respect. Valerius moved closer, circling her like a hunter. Your presence makes things difficult. You make the prince comfortable in his isolation. You enable his refusal to adapt. I help him feel less alone. You help him remain helpless. Valerius stopped in front of her. The kindest thing you could do for Prince Alaric is to distance yourself. Let him struggle. Let him learn to survive in a world that won't sign back to him. That's cruel. That's reality. Valerius's face softened slightly. Or perhaps it was a trick of the light. I'm not a monster, Miss Thorne. I've served this kingdom for 400 years. I've seen weak rulers destroy nations. Prince Alaric needs to be strong, not coddled. He walked to his desk and pulled out a sealed letter. This is a transfer order. You'll be reassigned to the South Wing, effective immediately. Better pay, easier duties. You'll never have to see the prince again. Lena stared at the letter as if it were a snake. And if I refuse? Then you'll be dismissed entirely. No references. No final pay. Valerius set the letter down between them. Take the night to think about it. But understand this is not a discussion. It's mercy. Lena went to the courtyard the next morning, her heart heavy as stone. She'd spent all night wrestling with the decision. Take the transfer and save her job, or refuse and lose everything. But when she saw Alaric waiting by the fountain, her choice became clear. He knew immediately something was wrong. What happened? He signed, rushing over. You look sad. I'm fine. You're lying. His small face was fierce. Your hands are doing the thing they do when you're upset. All stiff. Did I do something wrong? Alaric's signs grew smaller, more hesitant. I can be quieter during our lessons. I won't ask you to stay so long. Please don't be angry with me. Oh, sweetheart, no. Lena knelt and took his hands in hers. You did nothing wrong, nothing. Then what? How could she explain that his world was full of people who saw him as a problem to be solved? That they wanted her gone because she made him happy? Some people think I spend too much time with you. She signed carefully. Alaric's face fell. Father? No, other people. People who don't understand. They never understand. He signed, and the resignation in those small hands broke her heart. It's okay. You can go. Everyone leaves eventually. The casual acceptance in his signs, as if abandonment was just another fact of life like rain or sunrise, made Lena's decision for her. I'm not going anywhere, she signed fiercely. Do you hear me? I'm staying, but you said I don't care what they say. You're my friend. Friends don't leave. Alaric stared at her. Then he threw his arms around her neck and held on tight, his small body shaking with silent sobs. Neither of them saw the figure watching from the balcony above. King Aldrich, who had heard every word of Valerius's warning, and now watched his son cling to the only person who'd chosen to stay. The knock on Alaric's bedroom door came after midnight. The prince sat cross-legged on his bed, arranging his collection of stones by moonlight. He'd given up trying to sleep at normal hours long ago. The silence of night felt less lonely than the silence of day. When the door opened, Alaric looked up, expecting his night guard. Instead, his father stood in the doorway. King Aldrich seemed too large for the frame, his broad shoulders nearly touching both sides. He still wore his council clothes, though he'd removed his crown. Without it, he looked different, tired, almost human. Alaric froze, a smooth river stone held in his hand. His father never came to his bedroom. They saw each other at formal dinners, at council meetings where Alaric sat silent and decorative, at events that required the heir's presence, but never here. Never in this private space that belonged only to Alaric. The king stepped inside and closed the door. Good evening, father, Alaric signed formally, setting down his stones and sliding off the bed to bow. Aldrich held up a hand. Wait. His throat worked as if the words were stuck there. Finally, may I sit? Alaric nodded, confused. His father never asked permission for anything. The king lowered himself into the chair by Alaric's desk, a small chair meant for a child, making him look almost funny, like a bear trying to fit into a dollhouse. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and for a long moment simply looked at his son. Alaric shifted uncomfortably under the stare. His hands moved nervously. Did I do something wrong? No. Aldrich's voice was rough. No, you did nothing wrong. Silence stretched between them. Alaric's fingers twitched, wanting to sign to fill the emptiness with words his father wouldn't understand. But he kept his hand still, waiting. I've been thinking, Aldrich said finally. About your mother. Alaric's eyes widened. They never spoke about her. Not since she died. She would have known what to do, what to say. The king's hands clenched into fists. She was good at talking, at connecting. I'm good at war, at planning battles, at breaking things. He looked at his scarred knuckles. But not this. Not what? Alaric signed before he could stop himself. His father stared at the hand movements, and Alaric saw frustration flash across his face. The same frustration Alaric felt every day trying to exist in a world that wouldn't speak his language. That, Aldrich said quietly. Not that. He stood suddenly and began pacing. The small room made him seem like a caged animal. I've conquered kingdoms, negotiated peace treaties in 5 languages, commanded armies of thousands. But I can't. He stopped, his back to Alaric. I can't talk to my own son. Alaric's chest tightened. He'd never heard his father sound like this. Lost, vulnerable, almost desperate. The king turned to face him. You move your hand so fast with Lena in the library. In the courtyard. I watch you, and it's like you're speaking in lightning, and He held up his own hands, large and rough. I understand nothing. I could teach you, Alaric signed eagerly, hope blooming in his chest. It's not hard. Just shapes and... But his father wasn't looking at his hands. Couldn't read the offer being made. Alaric's hands fell to his sides. Aldrich saw the movement, the disappointment. Something seemed to break in his face. He crossed the room in 3 big steps and knelt before his son. The second time in 2 weeks he'd lowered himself to Alaric's level. Show me, he said. One sign, just one. For son, Alaric's breath caught. Slowly, he raised his hand and showed a simple gesture, fingers pointed at himself, then swept outward. Aldrich copied it, clumsy and uncertain. His fingers didn't quite match the shape. Alaric took his father's hand, so much larger than his own, and gently fixed the position. His father's skin was warm, rougher than he'd expected. He couldn't remember the last time they'd touched like this. Like this, he signed with his free hand. Like this, Aldrich repeated the gesture, and this time it was almost right. Alaric nodded enthusiastically. Then he showed him another sign. Father. It was more complex. A hand to the forehead, then brought down to the chest. Protective, strong. Aldrich practiced it 3 times before getting it right. When he finally did, he looked at Alaric with a look the prince had never seen before. Pride, maybe, or relief. Say something to me, Alaric signed, his hands trembling with excitement. Please, his father's jaw worked. He raised his hands, formed the sign slowly, carefully. My son. 2 words. Simple, imperfect. Everything. Alaric's eyes flooded with tears. He launched himself at his father, wrapping his small arms around the king's neck. Aldrich caught him, held him, one large hand holding the back of his son's head. They stayed like that for a long time in the moonlit bedroom, neither of them signing or speaking, just holding on. When Aldrich finally pulled back, his eyes were wet. He tried to sign again, struggled, then gave up and simply spoke. I need help. Will you teach me more? Will Lena teach me? Alaric nodded so hard his whole body shook. Tomorrow then, after council. Promise? Promise. Alaric yawned despite himself, the excitement of the day finally catching up with him. Aldrich stood, lifting his son easily. 7 years old was still young enough to be carried. Though not for much longer, at the doorway, the king paused and turned back to Lena. His free hand moved, forming signs that had taken him hours to practice in private. Thank you for teaching me to see my son. He was always there, Lena signed back. You just needed to learn his language. We all did, Aldrich agreed. Then, with his son drowsing against his shoulder, he added, Tomorrow I'm issuing a royal order. Sign language will be taught throughout the palace, to the guards, the servants, the council members. Everyone, Your Majesty, it's not enough. But it's a start. His face was serious now, regal. No child in my kingdom should feel invisible because the world won't learn their language. And no parent should be separated from their child by something as simple as words. He carried Alaric away, the prince's small hand trailing behind them, fingers moving sleepily in unconscious signs even as he drifted toward dreams. Lena remained on the balcony, watching the last lanterns disappear into the stars. She thought about the terrified girl who'd spilled wine 3 weeks ago, certain she'd be killed for speaking to a prince, about a lonely boy who'd learned that being different meant being invisible, about a king who'd forgotten how to be a father, until his son taught him that strength came in many forms. Below in the courtyard, she saw palace guards already practicing signs with each other, laughing at their mistakes, trying again, servants teaching rich people teaching children. A language of hands spreading through the palace like spring flowers after a long winter. A new tradition born from a moment of broken crystal and spilled wine, born from one simple question. Are you okay? And an answer that changed everything. Yes, now I am. 6 months later, the Royal Library held its first public signing hour. Prince Alaric, now 8, taught a room full of children, human and vampire alike, how to sign their names, tell stories and speak without voices. His father attended every session, sitting in the back, still learning, still trying. still there. And when Alaric signed his stories, hands moving like lightning, painting pictures in the air, the entire room understood. Finally, the silent air had found his voice, and the kingdom had learned to listen